Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Because Football podcast. This is your host, Andrew. Today, our guest is Jeremiah White, principal owner of White Sports Ventures. Jeremiah is a former U.S. men's national team player with a soccer career spanning Europe, the U.S., and the Middle East. He's got a robust track record of building and scaling brands. This experience includes aiding multiple companies in achieving successful exits or asset sales. He was among the first consultants for the Saudi Arabian government, focusing on reimagining the reputation of the Saudi Arabian Olympic Committee for Western audiences. Currently, he's an MLS great and Next Legacy Fellow, a Techstars mentor, and part owner of an MLS Next Pro team. There's a few takeaways from this. The range of business ventures and experiences that Jeremiah has been involved in is really impressive, but it also, for us to be able to listen, is really insightful. As a player, he made the decision to try to go abroad to places, countries, cultures, to learn, to be open to new ideas, ways of living and being. Earlier brave decisions from him, interwoven with his footballing career, set a lot of the foundation for what was to come. And it's been pretty cool that he's been able to build a career that's gone from, marketing, from investing, and now related around various sporting entities and ventures. But being that we are both from the Philadelphia area and obviously invested in American soccer, we also had to go and make quite a detour in talking about current challenges, but also opportunities within the game in the US, especially about how can we create more access, not only for players at foundational levels of the game, but for coaches as well. And then we talked also about one of his newer projects. He's a part owner now of the Town FC, which is an MLS Next Pro franchise. A lot of great stuff in this. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you can use some of it to reflect on and gain a lot of insight into some of the, maybe just to think a little bit bigger about wherever you are, what that possibly can be, and what can be some of the steps and the connections and the risks and brave decisions you need to make to get there. So hope you guys enjoy it. And here we are, Jeremiah White on the Because Football podcast. Vamos. All right, Jeremiah, we are live. So one thing I love to always start every podcast with is, obviously, I know some of your Philly soccer backgrounds and had seen your name in the Inquirer and the paper and stuff growing up. What's your earliest memory of the game?
My earliest memory is looking through my dad's scrapbook. My dad played soccer at Central Bucks before it was East and West.
Okay.
So I would go up to his office and look through his scrapbooks when I was a kid, and that was really my first intro to the game, but also my first source of inspiration. So that's the earliest.
Very cool. I can identify with that, man, because my dad kept yearbooks from his high school days. He was from like Hamilton outside of Jersey. He played at the Hun School back in the day,
Yeah.
and the yellow newspaper, right, that's been in between like 2 pages for years, and seeing those things. And same, man, I was like enamored with all of that. And just, do you have like a prized piece? Like what in there would be something that you're really proud of, or might be connected to like a really special memory for you?
The thing or the article that's most important to me is the one, it's pretty recent in the Inquirer, that kind of talks about my dad's journey, my journey, and then my son's journey. So that's probably the most valuable. I mean, the media around my son and just showing that connection and the legacy and those things, that I think that matters more than anything else to me. Actually, three. I did one spot on, I think it was CBS, and then there were two Inquirer articles, one with my dad, me, my son, and then another one recently that just came out that's just about me, my son, and I. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome, man. Yeah. Those stories like that you guys have and you're sharing is amazing, because I feel like, fortunately, this newer generation and maybe the most recent generation in American soccer might not have that same like generational piece, right, of like having it passed down. But I think for much of the world, that culture, it's something I talk with people around the world of like, hey, what does the United States have? What does it need? And the big thing that always comes back to me to improve the game, whatever that means here, is like comes back to that culture, which just takes time. It takes the generations. It takes like your dad literally just kicking around with you in the yard, giving you his advice, his feedback. I had that from my dad. Then you pass that on to your son. It's it's really awesome to see how like the game can trickle down to the generations and make an impact.
Yeah, I think that's how things should be done. The passion we all have for it. I mean, we share it, right? If you're fortunate enough to turn your passion into something that you're actually really good at, then
Hmm.
it's something I think you would naturally share with your kid. Because again, like for me and my son, I'm probably at my best when I'm engaging with him through some avenue that's soccer related, right? So he's getting the best out of me because that's, kind of webbed out into all of
Brings
my
you like it brings
yeah,
like the life out of you, right? The drive and expression and yeah,
everything,
what it
my
takes to
yeah,
yeah.
passion, and then the detailed things like dedication, focus, professionalism, all those attributes that I kind of use in other areas of my life have their origins in are part of their origins in soccer, right? It goes back beyond that, right? But a lot of it kind of matured where it was applied through soccer, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I would say he gets the best of me through that.
Different areas of yourself that come out with the connection of the game. Kind of leads a question I wanted to ask you because you had played in the Philadelphia area locally, Haverford School, then went on to Wake Forest, right? Played at Wake,
So,
and then went overseas, right? Tried that. I think one of the, in addition to the articles in the Inquirer back in the day, when it was the print media, and was also reading like the old like Yanks Abroad website. I don't know if you remember that one. Like it was like a
yeah,
blog,
yeah, I
right?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think I had seen you on there, and like I was like, oh yeah, and your name came up again and all that, and like tracking. So I mean, you had quite a journey, but I think that the part I want to zone in on because it's relevant now for some recent big highlights within football is you had played in Saudi Arabia. We've seen now Saudi Arabia has just been recently awarded the 2030 World Cup, right? Or is it 34?
I'm not much help here.
No? All right. All right. So either way, right? I think that the thing where I'm trying to bring this to Jeremiah is like you were playing there, right? And that seemed to be looking at your background was like that seemed to be a time and opportunity where you kind of stepped beyond just being a player, the roots of becoming not only like an investor, now a club owner, and the different ventures you've been a part of. It seemed like just looking like chronologically at your background from what I can see, like, would you agree with that? Is that a time where you kind of stepped out
Yeah,
of just like simply being a footballer, right, to kind of expand? So I'm curious, like, what are some of the memories, the moments, like those like personal changes that you went through to like kind of put yourself in that position?
yeah, it's a really good question. At that time, there were a few considerations before going to Saudi. One was obviously I wanted the the pay.
100%.
Yeah, obviously, right? It was really, really good. And even then, it was really good. So I wanted to kind of have that level of security. But then I also wanted to see the world. I wanted to use the game to see more of the world and build more relationships. I always saw the game as a way to um, experience other cultures, meet people. It was really, really an important part of the journey for me. It wasn't just
Mhm.
the game. It was
Yeah.
those journeys and those people and those experiences could add to the richness of my life. And I thought that would build me as a more well-rounded person, and then make
100%.
my point of view a bit more valuable as time went on because I had these unique or a series of unique experiences that would kind of hopefully come together into a perspective that others might not have,
Mhm.
right? And you know, like when I was there, I made a point to meet as many people as I could. So I made a lot of amazing contacts, and anyone that's at a club, especially because I was in the Saudi Premier League, so
Mhm.
there's a board and there's an owner and there are sponsors who have ownership groups and boards. So I made a point to meet as many of them as I could, express some of my interests in business and what I was looking to get into, and that ended up leading to opportunities to do business later on in Saudi Arabia and get contracts that I probably didn't deserve at the time, right? But because
Hmm.
I cultivated those relationships and kind of made my intentions clear, they were willing to help.
And I'm curious, like, so you started putting yourself in these situations with people who had been succeeding and like performing at a level you were on the pitch, but in other areas of life, right? Within business and reaching those levels. So like, was there any particular things that you remember of like that were like wake up calls, like, oh, I need to see things completely differently here? Or was it kind of just a gradual, like step by step as you met different people and went in on different projects and learned? Because I think it's something, again, speaks to you jumping from player to businessman, and just like where's that like perspective piece come in?
I come from a long line of business professionals, right? My dad was a very successful businessman in Philadelphia, so I've been around it. So these things weren't foreign to me. It wasn't like I'm like
Mm,
coming from sports with no background or foundation. I mean, I had a really
got it.
strong, and then obviously I went to the Haverford School and Wake Forest. So I mean, I'm around. I mean, these
Mhm.
are really high functioning, high performing environments, and you don't get access to those environments without being able to maintain and thrive right in those spaces. But then you're around all these other folks that come from that as well, so it wasn't new. um, but what I understood, and this is what I had learned over time, is you don't want to go into other cultures and start telling them what to do or
Yeah.
how they should think. You got to take your
Mhm.
time and really listen first, pay attention, keep your eyes open, listen more, say less. And then you start to figure out how things function, and then you pick your spots, especially in someone else's turf. It's really important.
Mhm.
So, but the cool thing about Saudi is you have a lot of people that are educated here. And once you find those folks, they're very welcoming. But I ended up, connecting with the right people who, one of my dear friends to this day got me a consulting job with the Saudi Arabia Olympic Committee. I mean, he went to Creighton, right? So you got a lot of folks there in certain positions that understand how things function here and understand the American mentality and can help bridge the gap.
As I've been kind of traveling around as well, it's always interesting to see the people who do have a background. Yeah, they studied in the US or they lived here for a little bit,
Mhm,
and I feel a little bit more understood too, right? Like
mhm,
say,
mhm,
okay, like we kind of just get it. And so I think that's obviously the foundation of most successful partnerships as well, is like the you got to be able to understand each other, and that can be a challenge with kind of the cross cultural piece. You said your dad
mhm,
was a successful businessman in Philly. What was he in?
mhm. So he had done a lot of things, but he worked with Rouse and Associates, and he kind of spearheaded the revitalization of the North Broad. So like the Uptown Theater, he
Okay,
redeveloped, and revitalized, and then a lot of community work, and then he worked for PDP, Philadelphia Development Partnerships. The name's since changed, but basically he gave out micro loans to entrepreneurs in the city.
very cool.
He was
Cool.
very pivotal in helping, in particular, Black entrepreneurs get access to capital to be able to do business. And then he basically built from the ground up intercultural family support services. Um, I think the name's changed again since then, but it was like they started from zero, and he built it to, a multi-million dollar nonprofit. Um, and then, I mean, he did a lot of things simultaneously. I think about it now, and it's like he really was prolific. And he consults, and he's retired and does his thing. He likes to come over to my house and tell me what to do a lot, but
Well, that's in the
he,
job description, right? That's in
yeah,
his job
yeah,
description right there. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Sounds like a really fascinating guy. I think the interesting part to me is like the quote unquote business side, but then also like the socially minded aspect in that role within the community, and like being able to help people through some of those arms and kind of revitalize in different parts of the city as well. It's cool work that you can literally look at and be like, oh yeah, this is, whenever you drive by, there's like, this was something that he was a part of. Is very cool.
Well,
As
well,
you, Yeah.
when you really quickly, so especially with intercultural family support services, what they did was they helped uh, they helped immigrants that were coming to the city of Philadelphia get set up with school, housing, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Um, uh, Daycare services. I mean, everything. So when I was a kid, I met people from all over the world. I mean, I
Mm.
remember playing soccer with kids I couldn't even communicate with I was
Yeah.
young.
Just the ball, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was never afraid of. I mean, it's just that, like when I think back, I'm like, it was like in my just it was a natural thing for me to say, all right, I'm going to Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember at the time when I made the choice, people were freaking out, like my family especially, because well, not my but some of my extended family and friends, right?
Right.
And I just couldn't understand why they were freaking out. I'm like, well, I got to go see, right? And but it was just natural to me, and it when you think about it, it was very unnatural for them.
Like you said, you kind of, as a young kid, you had the game and you had people from different places involved. So it's kind of natural that you had that open, like, curiosity and wanted to go experience the world and
Yeah,
pursuing that. But
my mom would take us to travel as well. If there was a deal to be had on a trip, she would just take us out of school and we would go. Like there was no, so it's like my
yeah,
parents, I mean, the extent to which my parents and their personalities and what was important to them have shaped me is just it's really something.
that's awesome, man. Sounds like they put you on a great path and have been a big part of the success that you had.
I think so.
That's kind of your, like, as I understand it, being a special advisor for the Saudi Olympic Committee and then being involved in developing some business partnerships there. Now it seems like with the various ventures you got going on, it's maybe a little bit more around like American soccer culture, right? And opportunities within the
Mhm.
US. There's a lot, and I'm excited to get to different parts of it because I think it's amazing, and I'm excited to talk to you about it because you've kind of operated in different spaces, whether it's media, now club ownership, and looking for opportunities. So you kind of cover a wide spread of what's happening within the industry and the culture now. What excites you about the game and the opportunities in the US at this stage?
Things that excite me are I think are also the things that kind of make me slightly concerned. Let me not say concerned. They're areas of opportunity where I think I can provide some value. And instead of just talking about it, I'm doing it, right? I love that there is an intention and a concerted effort to create a professional pathway for kids that's meaningful, right? I think the game is, like coach education's more sophisticated. Our player pathway is more sophisticated. The way in which we y- organize and structure competition and competitive environments is far more sophisticated than anything I had, right? I mean, it's just not even close. There are far more good players. There are far more players that are technically competent, tactically
Mm.
competent, and I think that's great, right? I do think that with those improvements, cost has gone up, and I think access to opportunity, while it has gone up, it's still problematic in certain areas that are really important. For instance, coaching.
Mm.
We've got some bottlenecks in on the coaching side that I think are really important to kind of overcome. We've got way too many good players for the amount of good coaches there are. And it's not because we don't have good coaches. It's because the access to or the barrier to entry in terms of coaching and getting the credentialing that's necessary is cost prohibitive. It's just way too expensive. And I've literally, my own experience, seen coaches that have very little means that are good trainers that do well with connecting with kids and know how to build the necessary skills, but because they don't have the access to capital, they can't get a job with their local MLS club, right? And the local MLS club does not won't fund their education. And I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying this is a dynamic that I've personally seen.
Okay.
But this coach produces players that the MLS club takes. So he's good enough for you to take players, but he's not good enough for you to invest in him
Hmm.
to be able to build a more stable bridge for between what he's doing and what you guys are doing. Again, not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that's something I've personally seen.
Hmm.
And, I just think we can do better. But I think we can do better.
Myself of like I when I first got into coaching almost 15 years ago, I got my D license like right out of college, wanted to get on it, all that. And then I was always thinking, okay, I'll eventually get the C, that next one. And then every time it came to like, all right, maybe it's time to do this, it was again cost and then like time as well. And there's not that many of these courses, right? And it require travel. And so was it something I could have done? Sure, but like at great sacrifice. And then I just found that okay, it's what the pathway I decided to go is like it doesn't make sense for me. So I think that's a fair point. I think on the player development side is where I also see and like my background was growing up coached by my dad when I was younger, probably similar to you. And like you said, the infrastructure now, the opportunities, like the fact that it's pretty much a given, at least in the Philadelphia area, if you're a kid with any quality at one of these a recognized club, is you're going to have someone who has done some kind of license, who has played the game, who has a background from a young age, so there's like these opportunities now that we didn't have as kids. But I agree that the cost piece is always something that comes up. The pay to play model is always something that comes up and is seen as something that's hindering development because it does limit opportunity. And I get it. And I have a business that is a for-profit business for coaching for extra training. And I see that and I think there's a place for that too. And I also, on my other side, I'm like, I really wish that there was another way that I could make things more accessible, or at least in the middle. And then there's just certain aspects of American society, business costs of things that just seem to make it difficult. So I'm curious, like on the player pathway side, I think whatever solutions we're coming up with, they're going to be uniquely American, right? As opposed to looking to Europe for this or South America or other models. And I too share some hesitance with the fact that when we talk about changing it usually seems to be like an elite focused pathway, which is great. We've seen that it's making an impact of producing more players. But as far as like that base, right? I always think about that base of quality. Like what's your norm for the lower level and what access is there to play, whether it's for a competitive purpose or just as a outlet to be fit, to make social connections, to grow as a person. What are some of your thoughts around kind of like that player development pathway and making that like more accessible to greater amounts of kids within the US?
Listen, people play everywhere, and you can play on a blacktop surface. You can play in a park. We have no shortage of sort of those places to play, but you're
Right.
talking about actually getting quality coaching and actually getting quality, finding a quality development environment. And I think economics is an interesting thing, man. I mean, I went to the Harvard School, you went to Westchester East. These are very wealthy
Mm-hmm.
places.
Yep.
You drive 40 minutes and you're in a place where people are really having a hard time. Now, I've been other places where the people that are having a hard time here look like they appear wealthy compared to those other places, right? I mean, because you
Mm-hmm.
got you got
Mm-hmm.
a paved road, you can get
Yeah.
clean water,
Yep.
you can, your
Yeah.
air is
Level of
clean at least.
development for sure.
There it is, right? So I just believe education and giving people the tools to, you kind of level the playing field a little bit when you give people access to the education information. You actually give them an opportunity, with the necessary dedication, determination to take a step up, improve yourself. And I think, we've got to make a concerted effort to do that at the at the lower age, the younger ages, at the earliest levels of development,
Mm-hmm.
in the early stages of development. And that even means for coaches. Um, just reduce those barriers to entry at the younger ages, I think is a start. It's not the answer, but it's a start. Because I think when you do that, you not only create additional bridges for communication and knowledge transfer and those sorts of things, but you build a culture of sharing and a culture of you start to build the base of that culture that you're talking about earlier, right?
Mhm.
Just bring that barrier to entry on at the entry points, right? So for the youngest kids that play, and then for the coaches that deal with the youngest kids that play, and then the coaches that are at the lowest rung of the pyramid, like just
Mhm.
take the cost burden off a little bit. Take it down. And then, there's a lot of folks at that level. That's where the bulk of the population is. So is there some way to
Yeah.
that we can use economies of scale to create some cost reduction around that process, right? I mean, it's a lot of folks, it's a lot of value there, and if we view all those folks as assets, right? If we view the young kid as an asset to the soccer community and the young coach as an asset to the soccer community, if we can improve the quality of that asset over time, we accrue value and we keep attention, we keep activity within this environment. And then what happens is that becomes valuable to companies, that becomes valuable to outside entities, and you can drive capital that way. It leverage economies of scale somehow. But I mean, I'm sort of surface leveling this. I've got some real thoughts on potential solutions. But again, it requires leadership. It requires leadership and
It's like every few years a new plan or something, right? Comes out with a US Soccer, whatever, and then it's almost like we like to talk about it and like actually implementing it. But I share the element of your perspective that it's like let's do it at the base, like the younger ages, and at your grassroots levels and the intramural, the rec programs, like where one you're engaging like the community, right? And there's that cultural piece of the game that we talked about, and how important that is. And some of it you can sort of fast track, and some of it just takes time, and it's like a generational piece. And we have made progress in the academies and the more elite level, but can we expand that base, and then see how it lifts the rest of that pyramid, as we develop more players. So
part of the challenge we're having is we're building the plane while we're flying it. And ultimately, you've got to make decisions. You got to make hard choices about where you're going to invest your time and capital. And so I mean, in terms of what's going on in our country in soccer wise, at least in youth soccer, it's like you focus on the highest level, and then you do have USYS and ECNL and those sorts of things. So you build the highest level out, and then you try to connect. You try to get deals done, and then connect these different entities into a complete system with certain rules, operating principles, etc. You try to get that done. So just requires dynamic leadership to get something of that scale done because we're not talking about a small operation. It's a significant undertaking. You also got to address the entry points, like that base, because the values at the highest level can't necessarily be the values at the entry point. I mean, the points of emphasis are in different places. You're gonna have some places where they're similar, but for the most part, the points of emphasis are gonna be different for these folks that are just entering the game. They want to discover the joy of the game. They want, you really want the game to be a source of happiness and joy and community, etc. And the psychosocial developmental piece and those sorts of things. So it's gonna require skillful leadership.
such a big plane that we're trying to build and fly, right? Like with and for eight, like you go back like generationally, like American soccer's, there's always been stop start. There's been different power groups and interests and people involved, and it's always been challenging to like kind of unify a vision. So I almost wonder if there's an element of like a little bit more local solutions, taking action on the local level to make those like entry points more effective and more accessible for people. To look a little bit towards that higher part of the pyramid, right? Is recently became an owner of the Town FC. That's the Earthquakes organization, right? San Jose Earthquakes within MLS. Is that something that's been kind of like a dream and a vision to kind of enact some of this leadership that you've been talking about?
It's really about accumulating pieces on the board, right? I mean, I want to own a portion of several independent MLS clubs. I think the guys at the town do something really well, which is they understand brand and its relation to community. They know how to throw an event and connect that to the game of soccer. They do that really well, really very effectively, and I think that's critical. But yeah, I mean, my goal is to own a piece in as many clubs as possible. MLS Next Pro, to be specific, for a variety of reasons. But there's the ownership layer, and then there's obviously the media layer. What you get when you kind of zoom out from that is you get distribution and you get access. It's sort of the
So
low resolution strategy.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
I'm part of it.
and so I'm curious, like you mentioned then distribution, the media, the brand side, which I think is really important. Like it's you open your phone, open the computer, there's a lot coming at us. So like what is going to stand out, get our attention, have us create a connection with something? I think it's with, for example, how kind of new the town is and many clubs within the US, like it's a relatively immature soccer landscape. Like a lot has to go into this, and some clubs have definitely done it better than others. But then the community piece is what you tied it to, because it's one thing to like come out with the nicest new kits and have like some great visual content around that. But to my understanding, like for more longevity of the organization and make it more relevant is like, yeah, can you actually cultivate and like sustain a fan base, right? And so you talked about some of like the media around that. I'm curious, like one of the properties you've got is Footy Access, right? Which is more like the media side. Then there's like Drip FC, which is merchandise and apparel. So a lot of those things kind of like fitting together different areas of what we love in football, right? And important elements of that, where the town is situated, like MLS Next Pro, and with all the messages, all the things vying for our attention. What is the role of the media piece that you guys are able to bring with the storytelling of the club, and how are you trying to connect that and like build that connection with the community?
Yeah, I mean, the town's got I mean, they do a good job of I mean, that's kind of why it's like
I
one
guess
of the
then the
reasons
question would
I'm
be is,
Mhm.
yeah, are you guys like as far as Footy Access, some of those like planning to be more formal, like connected
Yeah,
with the town, or is it more just like
we're
bringing that background?
no, Drip FC is doing a deal with the town right now, and that'll involve some media and then apparel, because Drip sells grip socks and shin guards and bunch of other stuff in addition to having a pretty sizable media platform. So yeah, Drip and the town are going to be working together. Footy, I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure if we're going to have a formal engagement with the town, but if I'm certain Footy will be covering the town. I mean, Footy's more about news and media,
Mhm.
um, and Drip is more focused on the intersection of culture, style, soccer,
Okay.
etc. Yeah, yeah. But Drip, again, but Drip covers a bit of a wider audience than Footy. Yeah, if there's like a top talent coming through the town, Footy will be all over it. But in terms of like supporting, events around games, and I mean, the town does a really good job of making their games feel like festivals.
Mhm.
So they'll bring there's music, there's vendors, I mean, it's everything there. They make it feel like a festival, which is super cool. And Drip certainly fits into that.
Awesome. And then I guess if we zoom to the level of like for the town, like what is kind of the story, of the club, right? And how are you trying to connect that with the community? Of course, the events seem like a big piece of that, but as far as like telling that story of where the club, because if you look at like, I think American sports is a tricky one because we do have some some precedents in like college sports, right? Of like the popularity of March Madness is massive, right? And college football, national champions, all of that. Like there's an affinity there. And so in a way, it's like MLS Next Pro has that element of like, hey, this is literally like in the name, like the next generation, like the next guys, but it doesn't necessarily have the community connection of like, oh, this is my alma mater, I went to school here, that creates a personal connection, right? So it's like a bit more of, hey, where's the relevance? Like, why should we show up to the festival, right? Like, why should
Yeah,
we,
yeah,
right? So what do
yeah.
you think is that story and that appeals
No,
and
it's a good
that you're kind of
question.
trying to tell?
It's like a unique thing, like with the Bay Area. I mean, you've got all these towns around in and around the Bay, and they all there are a lot of clubs that come to the games, right? And I think when you connect values to a brand, well, you have the opportunity to call out people who have shared values. But what you have is you have the opportunity for people to see themselves or their town in the values and maybe the personality of the team on the field, and then come together for these festivals and have an experience that sort of um, you know connects them together, but also engages them. So you end up having a larger town than you originally thought you might have, right? So I think the turning a game into like a festival idea, just um, and the way they do it, I mean, it's super cool in terms of like the food and it's really something to experience. But over time, what you do is you connect people into this idea of, yeah, we're a part of the town, and that town is bigger than just the name of your specific town, but you're part of this
Mhm.
town. I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty cool. There, you know, if you get that right, you have a chance to build something that can spread
Yeah,
and
and
be
so it sounds like
contagious.
then, yeah, it sounds like I'm not super familiar with like the Bay Area, but it's taking people's identification with their smaller community and then like just like bridging that, and
That's right.
the club
That's right.
is the way of like kind of making that bigger, right? And I think
That's
as
right.
far as like the festival experimental aspect, like the thing about it that sticks out to me is like there the game on the grass is not really within control, as far as sometimes you're going to get a 0-0 and people aren't going to like that and people's attention spans aren't going to enjoy that. Sometimes you get a 4-3 thriller, right? Like, but if you add other elements to that game day experience for people to enjoy and then connect that to the club, I'm seeing it around the world. Like it makes a big difference, the buzz, the atmosphere before a game. Some cultures do that really well organically, and they've got what they're doing. Like Argentina, for example, I was there earlier this year. Like the Previa's there and everything. Like they've got.
We do it well. We do it
We do
well.
it well too. Yeah,
We tailgate. We do all kind. We do it really well. We do it very well. We're I don't think there's a culture that has a leg up on us in terms of that, right? I mean, baseball, football, but we do it.
I agree, and that's probably where some of my appreciation for like the Argentine comes in, because there's like shadows of the U.S. style there. Then on the other hand, I've been to some where it's like crickets. You show up and then everything does ride on the match itself, but you're already a little bit like even the most like dedicated diehard soccer purists are like they're into it, but otherwise it's like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to make the effort to come and be a part of this, right? Or they don't feel that engagement and that connection. So I just think that's kind of becoming ever more important. Which yeah, so it sounds like fascinating. It makes me want to get out there at some point. I love to experience it myself.
Definitely.
All right, so this segment's kind of a newer one, Jeremiah. Right, we've got our all-time five-a-side that I want to hear from you. What's your all-time five-a-side? And the interesting part of that is that you've got to pick yourself and put yourself somewhere in the team. So really, you just get to pick your four all-time greats, legends, whoever they may be. So under pressure, off the top of your head, who's going to your
No,
all-time five-a-side?
I'm riding with my family. So it's me, my son, my dad, my younger son because he plays, and my daughter. Man, I'm
Okay.
riding with the home team. Let's go.
There we
but if I
go.
were to
Not a
pick my all-time,
hesitation.
nah, there's no hesitation. And if my daughter doesn't want to play, we're throwing R9 in there. So
All right, good shout. Yeah. So then you guys are going up against some of the other guests. You're going up against a team of Maradona, Zidane, Platini.
it's okay.
Who else is in that
We
team? You
foul
got
and
them.
we foul. It's okay.
You can't touch that family bond, right? The
No,
family bond is, you talk about
no.
team spirit and chemistry. You can't touch that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right,
And
awesome.
we'll foul. We'll foul. It's cool.
It's five-a-side, right? It's five-a-side. It's just your mate
Yeah,
from around the corner that's
that's
refing.
it.
The one is where I always like to kind of build to, and I think through the conversation we've already seen like shadows of this, but because football podcasts, I'm going to ask if you could complete the sentence because football.
Is the most important thing outside of family. I mean, yeah, it's that important to me. Yeah, outside of family, it's the most important thing in my
Yeah,
life.
and in your
So yeah,
family's case, like super super integrated and connected with as well. Awesome. Well, Jeremiah, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Like, I feel like every mini segment we had, we could kind of do a separate podcast off of it if we want to talk about American soccer and expanding opportunity for coaches and players. We want to talk about more the details of your journey, various properties that you're part of and investing in, and kind of your vision for the future. But we appreciate it. What's the best way for people to keep track of you, get in touch, and what should they be keeping an eye on?
just go to my Instagram. It's Jeremiah White 3. I think I have it that way.
Cool. We'll put that in the description.
Um,
Yeah.
and then you can go to my website, and that'll kind of web you out to everything. It's jeremiahwhite.info.
So everybody, make sure you take a look there, and follow the town as well. Keep an eye on the town, and maybe book your trip out there to experience that footy festival feeling. But appreciate you guys watching, sticking with us for another episode of Because Football Podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Today we have a part 2, which is a first for the podcast. We've got a part 2 of our episode with Jeremiah White, but I think the really interesting part about it is that we flipped the script literally, and Jeremiah actually interviewed me. His questions and his perspective and his, I'd call it, benevolent grilling of me really opened up some blind spots and areas that I've got to consider. And I hope that some of these questions and ideas are relevant to you. Yeah, hope you guys enjoy this one, but we're going to get on to Because Football Podcast with Jeremiah White, part 2. Let's go.